3 months have passed since Team Jiraiya's mission to the Land of Wind, and no further incidents have arisen to test our heroes. However, this is not to say that they're at peace. Nagato still wakes each night in a cold sweat, the faces of the 2 sand shinobi and their child still haunting his dreams, and more than once he has woken to see his friends, or Jiraiya-Sensei standing over him, telling him that he's been screaming in his sleep. Unfortunately, there is little any of them can do about this, and so focusing on what they can control, they continue their training as per usual. Though the 3 genin have grown more proficient in their general ninja arts, none of them have had any significant breakthroughs in their areas of specialization, with Konan still unable to perfect this latest technique she's devised for her paper ninjutsu, Yahiko still unable to master the Tanto blade, and Nagato still unable to activate any of the Rinnegan's powers outside of a life or death situation. Even Jiraiya-Sensei is in something of a rut, as his investigation into their enemy has turned up nothing new, even if he is fairly sure he knows who they are. With no evidence he cannot act, and so must wait for them to strike again, a prospect he does not relish. However, the Toad Sage at least is given some slight balm for his worries when he is informed that Orochimaru and Tsunade have finally returned to the village. Gathering his squad, Jiraiya goes to meet his 2 friends at the gate, welcoming them home. Both Orochimaru and Tsunade look surprised to see the children with Jiraiya, with Tsunade commenting that Hiruzen always was too lenient with him, while Orochimaru is more intrigued by Nagato's eyes now that he can see them. There is a hunger to the snake Sanin's gaze as he inspects Nagato, so much so that Yahiko steps between them, a scowl on his face, and one hand firmly planted on the hilt of his Tanto. Trying to diffuse the tension, Jiraiya tells his student to take it easy, saying they're all friends here, but Yahiko doesn't take his eyes off Orochimaru for an instant, reminding his sensei that when they first met, Orochimaru wanted to kill him, Nagato, and Konan. Orochimaru coos that he suggested it. If he had wanted to kill them, they'd be dead. He then flicks his yellow eyes up to Jiraiya, musing that students really do take after their masters, since this one is as ill-mannered as him. Jiraiya chuckles that Orochimaru's got him there, agreeing Yahiko is quite similar to him, a claim which makes the genin beam with pride, showing that even his smile resembles his master's. Jiraiya then continues that in fact all 3 of his students remind him a lot of how they were as kids, since Nagato is a genius like Orochimaru, and Konan's got a lot of willpower just like Tsunade, not to mention when she's older she'll be quite the looker. He then flashes Tsunade his best pervy grin, but the woman rebuffs it with a scoff that says, "Not if you were the last man on Earth," before sauntering off to report to Hiruzen. Orochimaru follows suit, though before he goes, he tells Jiraiya that he should be pleased. His students are most intriguing. This sends a shiver down Yahiko's spine, and when the Pale Man is gone, he tells Jiraiya that he still doesn't like him. Jiraiya replies that Orochimaru has his quirks, and even a few unsavory qualities, but he's fought alongside him enough times that he trusts the other man like a brother. Yahiko grumbles in that case he guesses he can give him a chance, though something still seems off about the guy. That evening, after the kids have gone to bed, Jiraiya seeks out his fellow Sanin, hoping that he finally has someone else to confide in. Over a few drinks, he admits that since he started teaching, he's never been so afraid and so happy at the same time. Afraid that he's going to let his students down, but happy at being able to witness each of their successes, and in a way just being with them. Orochimaru, who as usual remains perfectly sober, tells his comrade that he is falling victim to his own sentimentality, and these children are truthfully little more than a diversion he could do without. However, Tsunade, who is a few drinks in herself, actually comes to Jiraiya's defense, saying she thinks he's growing up at long last, and learning to care about something other than his lurid and lecherous pursuits. Jiraiya laughs that if he didn't know better, he'd say she actually sounds impressed by him, suggesting that he'd be happy to show her how grown up he is over a date. This is met as one would expect, with a fierce uppercut from the taijutsu mistress which sends Jiraiya flying, while Orochimaru muses that neither of them have changed all that much from when they were genin. Turning in unison, Jiraiya and Tsunade protest that isn't true at all, with Jiraiya using this brief interlude to retake his place at the table without getting hit again. He then lowers his voice and says that he didn't just call them here to gush about his students. He actually wanted to ask what either of them know about Danzo Shimura. Orochimaru says that he knows little beyond the man's reputation for his fervent, even brutal patriotism, while Tsunade says that Great Uncle Tobirama actually did mention Danzo to her once or twice when she was little. Jiraiya eagerly asks what Lord Second had to say about him, and Tsunade replies that Tobirama always thought he had the same sort of ambition as Madara Uchiha. her. When channeled into the right cause, it could reshape the world and turn the stuff of dreams into reality. But if his aim ever turned to darkness, no one would be safe from him, and only death would keep him from his goals. Orochimaru chuckles that he sounds quite formidable, before asking why Jiraiya is suddenly interested in the man, to which the Toad Sage replies, "Because I think he's trying to kill me and my students." This declaration startles Tsunade, who spills her drink, before questioning if Jiraiya is sure, breathing that this is a very serious accusation. Jiraiya admits that he can't confirm it, but he's narrowed it down to someone on the village council, and he's had reason to suspect Danzo from the start. Tsunade asks why, and Jiraiya elaborates, telling her about Danzo's comment during the meeting before his team's first C-rank mission, and his suspicions that the attack that followed has something to do with Nagato. Here Orochimaru speaks up, saying if he were to guess, he would assume Danzo wants the boy's eyes, since the Rinnegan are as rare as they are powerful, and if Danzo is truly as ambitious as Lord Second said, they would be the sort of tool he would crave. Jiraiya seems repulsed by such a thought, but Orochimaru curtly states that like it or not, this is the most probable answer, so Jiraiya must accept it. The legendary pervert solemnly nods, muttering that he's not denying his friend's claim, he just can't imagine what sort of man would steal a child's eyes. Orochimaru retorts that is because Jiraiya lacks ambition, and without it, it would be difficult to understand the lengths one would go to for their desires. But truthfully, he doesn't need to understand Danzo's rationalizations to outwit him, only his motivations, and since he does, the only thing left to do is act. Jiraiya grimly nods, saying though he hates to do it, he'll need to use the kids as bait again, and hope the skills he's taught them will be enough to see them through. The next morning, Jiraiya comes to his team with surprising news that he has decided to enter them in the upcoming Chunin Exams. Yahiko of course is eager, saying he'll show the examiner how strong he's gotten and become a Chunin in no time, an outlook which Jiraiya encourages, telling his student that it won't be easy, but he believes in him. Konan meanwhile says she doesn't really care about ranking up, but she'll do it to support her teammates. While Nagato asks if there's a reason their sensei suddenly made this decision, Jiraiya explains that while he thinks it will be good experience to help them grow and measure themselves against their peers, he does have a secondary reason, that being his hope that the exam will be a good cover to smoke out their enemy. Stoically, Konan asks if that means he's concluded that the enemy is after one of them, and not him. Jiraiya nods, promising that this changes nothing, and he will still be there to protect them with his life. Pragmatic as ever, Konan says such action would be unwise, since if he is not the target, then in the enemy's eyes he is expendable. Better to take a step back and let the three of them take care of each other, while he focuses on watching their back from afar. Nagato and Yahiko both agree with Konan's plan, and Jiraiya is left speechless at the suggestion, having figured the kids would be afraid at the thought of some malicious force from within the village trying to kill them. Instead, they have moved right on to creating a practical solution, and he cannot help but be impressed by their resilience. These thoughts seem to be clearly written on Jiraiya's face, or perhaps Konan has simply gotten to know her sensei too well, as when she sees this, she smiles and tells him not to worry about them, reminding Jiraiya that they survived the war long before they met him. Laughing at himself, Jiraiya smiles that she's right of course, and for the first time wonders if maybe training these children has made him as sentimental as Orochimaru said. With the trio all in agreement, the next week is spent in intensive training, with a heavy focus on ways to combat ambushes, as well as going over the basics of the Chunin Exams, so that Nagato, Yahiko and Konan can be ready for what is to come. Finally, on the evening before the exams, Jiraiya tells them to take the night off, grinning that if they work any harder, they'll sleep through the exam. He then pulls out a pair of twin-stick popsicles, snapping both in half and throwing a stick to each of the kids, before flopping down on the grass with his own trait. Nagato, Yahiko and Konan join him, and the four of them lie back, watching the sky slowly turn from sunset's orange to the indigo of night. As they eat, Nagato asks his sensei if he thinks they'll be able to pass tomorrow, but Jiraiya admits that he doesn't really care if they pass or fail. What matters is they stay true to themselves in their ninja way. Do that and he'll always be proud of them. The next morning, Team Jiraiya make their way to the Ninja Academy for the first stage of their exams. Jiraiya wishes the three kids luck, then tells them that their first test is just beyond the door at the end of the hall. Eagerly, Yahiko runs ahead, bursting through the door, though what he sees chills him to his core, the exam proctor lying face down in a pool of blood. while a pale black-haired man in the garb of the hidden stone village stands over him with his sword raised. As soon as the stone shinobi makes eye contact with Yahiko, the doors slam shut behind him, sealing them both inside. The invader then shoots the boy an evil look, saying it's a shame he stumbled upon him like this, since protocol says now he has to kill him too. But as luck would have it, he's willing to cut Yahiko a deal, tell him how to get to the Hokage's office, and he can live. Suspiciously, Yahiko asks what this guy wants with old man Hiruzen, and the stone shinobi blithely replies that he's going to assassinate him, bringing the leaf to its knees and forcing them to surrender to the stone. It'll end the war today, and only cost the life of one old geezer. Pretty good deal in his opinion. Yahiko snaps back that he wants the war to end too, but this isn't the right way to end it, so the stone shinobi is delusional if he thinks he's going to tell him where the Hokage is. He then draws his tanto and rushes towards the man with a mighty roar. The stone shinobi jeers at Yahiko, asking if he really thinks he's going to defeat him with a butter knife like that, before whipping his sword round and clashing blades with the youth. Not being designed for sword-on-sword combat, the tanto shatters cleanly in two, and Yahiko is knocked off his feet, flying backwards and landing on his back. The stone swordsman then levels his blade at Yahiko's throat, telling him the kid has guts which he can respect, so he'll make him the offer one last time. The Hokage's life? Or his? Reluctantly, Yahiko says he's no traitor, so this guy might as well kill him, since he'll never talk. And in response, the stone shinobi shrugs and swings his blade to behead the boy. Yahiko only closes his eyes at the very last second, but instead of feeling the bite of cold steel on his throat, he feels a warm hand clap him on the shoulder as the stone shinobi says he's all done. Opening his eyes, the orange-haired boy finds himself back on his feet, with the stone shinobi now dressed in a Leaf Village flak jacket, while behind him, Nagato and Konan watch Yahiko with shared concern on their faces. The black-haired man then hands Yahiko a cookie, saying this might help take the edge off, as he explains that he has just passed the first stage of his Chunin Exams. This only baffles the boy more, but the man seems prepared for this, as he allows his black eyes to turn crimson, explaining that when Yahiko and his teammates entered the room, he used his Sharingan to put them all under a genjutsu. The test was to see what they'd do in a life or death situation, with the 3 ways to pass being to either break the genjutsu, defeat the invader, or as Yahiko did, refuse the offer and sacrifice himself for the good of the village. Yahiko then asks what Nagato and Konan did, with Nagato admitting that the Sharingan's genjutsu didn't work on him, so he just passed automatically, though after hearing of Yahiko's bravery, a part of him wishes he could have experienced the test, just to be sure that if push came to shove, he would have the guts to do what had to be done the same as Yahiko. Konan, on the other hand, says that she recognized it as a genjutsu, and so dispelled it a little while before Yahiko finished. Yahiko, still struggling to believe that what he just experienced wasn't reality, asks how Konan could tell it was a genjutsu. Konan admits that there were 2 things that tipped her off. The first being that something felt off with her own chakra the moment she stepped into the room, kinda like it wasn't as easily accessible as usual. It's a minor thing, but after all the training she'd put into honing her chakra control for her paper ninjutsu, it stood out to her as odd. Yahiko nods, agreeing that Jiraiya-Sensei's always said Konan has impressive chakra control and a knack for details, though he's gotta ask, what's the second reason? Blushing a little, Konan admits the second reason she knew it was a genjutsu was because Yahiko wasn't there. Yahiko looks confused at this comment, so Konan elaborates, explaining that she knows that if she were ever really in trouble, he wouldn't let anything stop him from helping her, and the fact that he wasn't there for her meant that it couldn't be real. Blushing a little as well at this explanation, Yahiko mumbles that of course he'd do anything for her, walking over so that he can stand with her and Nagato. After a moment, the Uchiha proctor tells the trio they're free to do what they want for the next few hours, but instructs them to be outside Training Ground 44 at 1 PM, since that will be where they receive instructions on the second stage of the exams. He also encourages them to use this time to relax, since genjutsu tends to leave people out of sorts for a while, and they'll need to be on top of their games for the next test, since it's even more daunting than the first. Yahiko has to suppress a grimace at this, considering how the first stage ended in his death. But nonetheless, he along with Nagato and Konan nod their understanding then depart the test room. Following a tasty lunch of Ichiraku ramen, the Genin trio arrive outside Training Ground 44 a little early, and to their surprise find a few dozen people mostly around their own age milling about and chatting amiably. Presumably these are the other Genin who passed the first stage, and so not really knowing anyone their own age, Team Jiraiya decide to get to know their peers. As soon as the other Genin spot them, however, a hush falls over their conversations, which in turn is replaced by the sound of low muttering like the buzz of 1,000 angry hornets. Most of the other Genin won't even meet their eyes, with those that do shooting Nagato in particular dirty looks. Loudly, Yahiko asks what their damn problem is, to which a boy with black hair pulled into a ponytail and a scar along his cheek replies that he shouldn't pay them any mind, they're just jealous since their team has one of the Dojutsu duo. Konan asks what the Dojutsu duo is, but before the boy can answer, Yahiko grins that if it's something the other teams are jealous of, it's probably got to do with him. Sighing, the boy with the ponytail tells Yahiko that he's not even close, since no one's going to be jealous of an idiotic nobody like him. As Yahiko chokes on this insult, the other boy continues, saying it's actually Nagato he was referring to. The way he didn't even fall for the Proctor's Sharingan Genjutsu has got the other Genin on edge, but to make matters worse, there's another guy who also shrugged it off like he was nothing, causing people to start calling them the Dojutsu duo, because they both have special eyes. This causes a look of deep curiosity to cross Nagato's face, wondering what this other person's special eyes could be. But he isn't left to wonder for long, as a tall, dark-haired boy with a striking resemblance to the Proctor steps out of the crowd to speak with him. Smiling, he modestly tells Nagato and the other three not to take that sort of gossip seriously, before introducing himself as Fugaku Uchiha. As he and Nagato shake hands, the redhead asks if he'd be correct in assuming that Fugaku's Dojutsu is the Sharingan, to which the taller boy nods. He then expresses great interest in Nagato's Rinnegan, saying that should they both pass the second round, he would quite like to face Nagato in the finals. Nagato isn't quite sure what this means, but agrees all the same, saying he eagerly awaits any chance to test his growth as a shinobi. As this transpires, Yahiko and Konan split off to have their own conversations, with Yahiko immediately starting to bicker with the ponytail boy, whose name it turns out is Shikaku Nara. Konan, meanwhile, is almost knocked off her feet when she collides with a girl with honey blonde hair and glasses. Hurriedly, the girl apologizes, saying she wasn't looking where she was going, but Konan says it's fine, introducing herself, and in turn learning the other girl is called Nono. Nono and Konan chat amiably for a while, with the honey-haired girl asking to take a look at Konan's paper flower barrette, and confessing her own worries for the next stage of the exam, considering how she was only added to her team this morning so they could have a third person to compete. Konan in turn shares her worries for the safety of her friends, saying she has reason to believe someone might be trying to hurt them. Comfortingly, Nono smiles that Konan has nothing to worry about, since one of her friends is a member of the Dojutsu duo, so no one would dare to try and hurt their team. Konan breathes that she hopes the other girl is right, before an adult in a flak jacket comes into view, signaling it's time for the second round to begin. With everyone moving to stand with their squad mates, Konan joins Nagato and Yahiko in the front row as the Chunin Proctor begins to explain the second round. He tells them that this training ground has a nickname, the Forest of Death, gained through the numerous little Genin like them it's killed. Their mission will be simple, prove that name wrong and survive for 72 hours within the forest. However, the flora and fauna won't be their only opponents, since each of them will be equipped with special kunai and shuriken designed specifically for this test. He then pulls out a shuriken and tosses it into the chest of a blonde boy to Shikaku's left. On impact, the shuriken explodes into black ink which drips down the boy's shirt for a moment. Cocking his head, the boy asks what the purpose of this is, but the Chunin simply tells him to wait for it. About 30 seconds after being hit by the ink shuriken, the boy vanishes with a faint pop, appearing 10 feet in the air and letting out a shriek as he crashes to the ground. The Chunin then explains that anyone hit by the ink will be teleported outside the forest and subsequently eliminated. But that is not all they need to know. From here, teamwork is no longer mandatory, with anyone able to eliminate anyone else. In fact, each of them should think long and hard about whether the value of having their teammates as allies in the forest outweighs the dangers they will pose as potential rivals in the finals. Next, they should know that there is only one bit of shelter in the whole forest, a tower in the middle, so it'd be smart to try and claim it as soon as possible if they don't want to be dinner for the giant man-eating centipedes. Finally, if they want out at any point, all they need to do is hit themselves with one of the ink weapons. It'll count as a forfeit, but it's better to be disqualified than dead. With this cheery thought, each genin is given a backpack with 3 ink kunai and 6 ink shuriken before being assigned one of the 44 gates along with the other 2 members of their squad. As soon as they get the signal to start, Team Jiraiya head through their gate and into the Forest of Death. None of them even consider turning on each other. In fact, it is quite the opposite, with the trio all having the same plan for how best to keep all 3 of them in the exam until the end. They all know the function of the tower is likely to bait the more greedy genin into open battle, and so decide at once to avoid it, knowing that their experience in the hidden rain will actually be an advantage here, as unlike most of the other competitors, they are quite comfortable sleeping in the open and foraging for food. They also decide to stick as close as they can to the forest's edge, since it is where the fewest predators are likely to be, while also eliminating one of the possible directions an enemy could attack from. It is a prudent plan, and so the 3 friends set to work finding a tall and sturdy tree nearby which they can turn into their base of operations. Thankfully, in a forest as overgrown as this one, it is not a difficult ask, meaning that within the first hour they have set up camp. However, even with this stability, they do not allow themselves to become complacent, agreeing to have rotating 4-hour watches so they can keep their eyes peeled for enemies or dangerous animals. Nagato volunteers to go first, and so climbing to the highest branch sets to work. About 2 hours into his watch, Nagato sees the vaguely familiar chakra of someone fast approaching, and so figuring it is one of their rivals, draws 2 shuriken, while telling his friends to be ready. Looking in the direction Nagato pointed, Yahiko and Konan can't see anything, with Konan charitably suggesting that Nagato must be getting tired, and so offers to take over for him early. Nagato shakes his head, saying he can see them quite clearly, pointing once more to the figure who is now running along the tree next to theirs, but this only earns him looks of concern and bewilderment from Yahiko and Konan. Figuring they won't be able to miss the newcomer when they're covered in ink, Nagato throws his shuriken, with both headed directly towards the target thanks to his enhanced vision. Down below, Yahiko and Konan watch the weapons hurtle towards seemingly nothing, but then something strange does happen. With the sound of metal on metal, both shuriken go flying off in random directions in a way that tells them Nagato is not mistaken and someone is definitely out there. Drawing a kunai and raising his voice, Yahiko calls out to the unseen intruder, telling them they can drop the invisibility routine since whatever jutsu they're using can't hide from the Rinnegan. Seeing no point to wasting chakra on a jutsu that grants no benefit, Konan's new friend Nono seemingly materializes from nowhere. However, unlike Nagato and Yahiko, she is not holding either of the exam weapons, instead clutching a dreadfully familiar Tanto blade. As Konan is unarmed, she is deemed the weakest link, and so Nono lunges at her first, thrusting with the knife in a way that would have been fatal had Konan not leapt to the side. Angrily, Yahiko asks what the hell the honey-haired girl thinks she's doing, but Nono ignores him, instead charging at Nagato as he is her primary target. Feeling his temper rising, Yahiko draws his own Tanto and steps in front of Nagato, parrying the attack before once more demanding to know what's going on. However, instead of Nono, it is Nagato who answers, as in a grave voice he tells his friends that he's figured out where he recognizes her chakra from. She's the fake Sandanbu who attacked them during their mission outside the village. In a flat tone, Nono confirms this, then slightly shifts the way she's holding her weapon, applying more pressure to the tip. This in turn causes Yahiko's blade to slip and twist, forcing him to relinquish his hold on it, as the young assassin scolds that he may use the weapon of the division, but that doesn't mean he knows how to wield it. She then kicks his dropped Tanto off the branch, leaving the orange-haired genin unarmed and at her mercy. This is enough to force Team Jiraiya to surrender, with Konan asking what Nono wants. Not taking her eyes off Yahiko, the other girl gestures at Nagato, saying her mission is to retrieve his eyes, no matter what. There is a faint quiver to Nono's voice as she says this, but even such a small thing does not pass unnoticed by Konan, who says that it sounds like she doesn't really want to hurt Nagato or any of them. Quiver definitely present now. The other girl replies that it doesn't matter what she wants. If she doesn't come back with those eyes, he'll kill her. Nagato asks who'll kill her, suggesting that maybe they can help, but with anguish in her voice, Nono says she can't say. Soothingly, Nagato assures her that she can trust them, but with anger now taking root, the girl once more declares that she can't say as she lunges at him. Summoning a fireball like Jiraiya-Sensei did during their first battle, Nagato launches the blazing orb at Nono, but the girl shows off her impressive ninja skill by not losing any momentum as she simply changes trajectory, running along the underside of the branch to avoid the fireball, before springing back up and delivering a fearsome slash to Nagato's cheek, narrowly avoiding his eye. Nagato winces in pain, and so Nono goes for another thrust, this time at the boy's throat, but is stopped when a paper shuriken knocks her blade off course. Looking back, she sees Konan, who lobs another few paper projectiles, before body flickering away as the other two members of her team do likewise. Scowling, Nono gives chase, as the three genin reluctantly flee deeper into the forest. Using his Rinnegan, Nagato can see her coming, and so warns his friends, but Yahiko grins that he has a plan, telling Nagato to hurl his backpack at her. Nagato complies, and as the bag goes soaring through the air, Yahiko fires off a water bullet jutsu which hits the backpack at high velocity, shredding it, and detonating all the ink weapons inside. Mixing with the water bullet, this creates a massive blanket of ink that obscures Nono from view, while also hiding Team Jiraiya from her. Knowing that she can't afford to be forced out of the forest, Nono falls back, allowing Nagato, Konan, and Yahiko to escape for now. The trio quickly find a new resting place, but there is little rest to be had as each of their hearts is pounding from what just happened. Nagato and Konan seem more shaken than Yahiko, so he defaults to his old leader role, suggesting the smartest thing they can do is stab themselves with ink kunai and get out of here. Sure, it'll suck to fail the exam, but like the proctor said, better to lose than to die. However, Konan disagrees, saying that this might be their best chance to capture one of their enemies alive and see what she knows. Nagato agrees, and since both Yahiko and Konan know that his life will be the one on the line if this plan fails, agree to back him up. A few hours later, Nagato finds himself waiting in a clearing deep in the forest. It does not take him long to see Nono's chakra approaching, but instead of striking a fighting pose, he waits until she is in range, telling her to stop as he pulls up his fringe to reveal a seal on his forehead. Hanging back in case of a trap, the would-be assassin asks what that is, and Nagato tells her that Jiraiya-Sensei put this on him before he came to the village, in case anyone tried to steal his eyes. Now if they are ever removed from his head, they'll immediately burst into flames, rendering them useless to anyone, so it seems like her mission's already failed. But that's okay, since like he said before, he and his friends can help her, they just need to know who she's working for. Nono begins to tremor, violently shaking her head in refusal, but Nagato remains undeterred, saying he can see she doesn't want to hurt him, not really, and he doesn't want to hurt her either. Konan said she seemed like a potential friend before the exam, and he would love to get to know her, but first she has to trust him. By now, Nono's shaking has gotten to the point of almost spasming, and through his enhanced vision, Nagato can see hints of tears in the honey-haired girl's eyes. However, when she takes a deep breath, the shaking stops, and there is nothing but emotionless determination when she looks up at him. Couching her blade for a lethal thrust, Nono tells him that if she cannot take his eyes, she will just take his head instead, and allow her allies to find a way to break the seal later. She then charges forward, as from the trees drops Konan, landing directly between her and Nagato. Wordlessly, Konan stands sentinel, but her presence does nothing to change the stony-faced Nono's trajectory, as she simply runs Konan through with her blade instead. However, instead of blood, the only thing to burst from Konan is a flurry of origami paper. In fact, her entire body explodes into paper, creating a cloud of the stuff all around Nono, as the real Konan lands to her left, musing that the paper clone technique still needs work, since it was meant to cry out Nagato's name before it was stabbed. Meanwhile, Yahiko lands behind Nono, firing off an even larger water jutsu which douses her in the paper, turning it into a sopping paste which coats her in the surrounding area. As Nono tries to wipe the slurry from her eyes, an overwhelming heat engulfs her as Nagato breathes fire on the wet paste, rapidly drying and hardening it into a full-body cast that immobilizes the assailant. As Nono is frozen in place, Team Jiraiya all approach her, congratulating each other on the first successful usage of their new team jutsu, which they dub the Ame-style paper prison. Glaring at Nagato as he wipes the fake mud seal off his forehead, Nono coldly growls at him to get it over with and kill her already, since she always knew failing this mission would mean death one way or the other. However, Nagato shakes his head, saying her death would be senseless and cruel. He meant what he said about helping her, and he'd never be able to face his sensei or himself if he went back on it now. Shock eclipsing anger, Nono asks what he's gonna do with her, and in a resolute tone, Nagato says she will see, though he's afraid she probably won't like it. From here, Team Jiraiya are able to avoid trouble, hiding out atop their base tree, with Nagato or Yahiko occasionally venturing down to the surface for food or water. Finally, at the end of the third day, they are allowed to leave the Forest of Death, and to their surprise, find that only 5 others have managed to pass this stage of the exam, those being Shikaku and his teammates, a stranger, and finally Fugaku Uchiha, who gives Nagato an approving nod when he sees that he is also still in the exam. The Chunin proctor from earlier tells these 8 genin that for their perseverance, they have all earned a spot in the finals, which will be a series of single elimination battles. However, victory in those battles does not guarantee promotion any more than loss forbids it. Instead, it will be a showcase of their skill as shinobi. For that reason, they will each have a month to train, so they can best hone their skills for the battles ahead. He then announces the first round matchups, and to his surprise, Nagato finds himself in the third fight of the round, squaring off against Choza Akamichi, one of Shikaku's teammates. But what is more surprising is that Konan and Yahiko are slated to face off against each other in the opening match. Yahiko declares this stinks, demanding that he be given a different opponent since he doesn't want to fight his friend, but the Chunin barks at him to shut up, telling him to follow Konan's example. In this regard, Konan has stayed perfectly still, not saying a word, and barely batting an eyelid at being told she must face her dear friend in combat. Seeing that he has no way to change the decision, Yahiko accepts it, harumphing away as Nagato and Konan follow. When they're out of sight of the competition, Nagato tells Konan that she's done well, and in response she nods, then dissipates, revealing herself to be another paper clone. The boys then hurry back to Jiraiya-Sensei's apartment, where he and Konan are waiting. Worriedly, Konan asks if Nagato and Yahiko were okay without her, but Yahiko says it was fine, praising that her paper clone was so convincing that no one suspected a thing. Nagato then asks if Nono gave her any trouble, but Konan shakes her head, saying the transformation jutsu went off without a hitch, and she was able to carry Nono back here without anyone noticing. The redhead then turns to his sensei, asking if he's had any luck getting information out of her. Dark circles line the Jonin's eyes, as if from several late nights, and with a sigh he answers that she's a tough nut to crack, that's for sure, having some sort of seal on her tongue that prevents her from divulging any information on her master. However, he promises that he will keep working and get the information they need. Meanwhile, the 3 of them can't afford to get distracted, since in 1 month's time, they'll be competing in front of the whole village, and with Nono now as their prisoner, who knows what tactic their enemy will employ next. And that's where we'll leave things for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.